You are listening to the Marc Guzman Podcast Experience. Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. Back before there was GarageBand, Audacity, and other digital audio editing software and programs, there were music synthesizers. Chances are you have seen a movie or heard a song that utilizes a synthesizer. From rock bands like The Who and Rush to creating the classic sounds of R2-D2, synthesizers have played a major role in creating the sounds of pop culture. Our guest today is Lance Hill, curator of the Vintage Synthesizer Museum in Emeryville. This is not your average museum, however. His massive collection of synthesizers are all live and able to be rented out to artists looking to add that special sound to their tracks. Today, Lance joins us over the phone to share the story of how his love of music synthesizers turned from a small obsession to a lifetime of work and accomplishment that he hopes to share with the world. So Lance, thanks for being on the podcast.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So let's get started here, and this is going to be a very interesting episode because I don't think a lot of people have really heard about synthesizing museum or a synthesizer museum. So when did you open up this museum?
We've been here for a little over 4 years.
Okay. What made you decide to open it up?
I had been interested in synthesizers, and when I got interested in synthesizers, no one was making analog synthesizers. So if you wanted an analog synthesizer, you had to buy an old one, a vintage one, and I started buying synths on Craigslist, a lot of broken ones, and I found a really good repair guy locally to work on them. And through that, over the course of a few years, I ended up kind of being like a dealer. And so I was buying and refurbishing and selling a lot of synthesizers. And because I had access to so many, I thought it would be really cool to just try and keep as many of the really good ones and open up a studio with them. If I could pull together a good enough collection. So after a few years, I had a really good collection put together, and then it took a couple more years to find a decent location for it.
Okay, now you're out of Emeryville, or is it Oakland?
Technically, it's Oakland. We're right on the border. We're 1 block from Emeryville, but technically we're in Oakland, or we're like half a block from Emeryville, and then we're also like 5 blocks from Berkeley.
Okay. Now, for the people
that
the
intersection 3.
Okay, so for the people that don't really know what a music synthesizer is or what it does or how they were originally used for, can you explain like an analog synthesizer and why they're so unique?
An analog synthesizer is a purely electronic instrument. Most or all like traditional instruments that you'd find in an orchestra or in a rock band or something like that, they all make physical vibrations, like a string vibrating, a reed, a drum. So there's actual, they're making vibrations in the air that we perceive as sound. A synthesizer does not. It's just a collection of electronic circuits, and if you amplify it through a speaker, it then makes sound. So it's purely electronic. It's electricity that's producing waves that could then be amplified and make sounds. But with most of these synthesizers, you have like a sound source, which is called the oscillator, and there'll be different wave shapes for the different oscillators, or within one oscillator, you can choose different wave shapes, and they each have a different timbre, so they each sound differently. There'll be a filter section where you can remove or emphasize harmonics from the oscillator sound source, and there'll be a volume section where you can contour the loudness and kind of like the duration of the sound. So you can, you're not just stuck to like one thing, like not to limit instruments, but a violin sounds like a violin, a trumpet sounds like a trumpet. With a synthesizer, you can craft sounds, you can craft millions of sounds. So you're not just stuck to one thing.
Okay. Approximately, do you know what year, like, the first one was designed and released?
Well, there's people have been making electronic instruments for a long time, probably as long as electricity has been commercially available. But synthesizers, as we think of them now, were designed around the same time in the early to mid 60s, almost simultaneously by Bob Moog on the East Coast and by Don Buchla here in the Bay Area. I don't know exactly what year that would be.
So have they always been
early
used
60s.
for music, just really modifying the sounds of instruments?
I don't know if I'd say music. I mean, when Don Buchla designed his first synthesizer, he was San Francisco Tape Music Center, and that was more like musique concrete, more like sound sculpture type stuff. It wasn't being designed to make tonal music, but the Moog synthesizer was definitely aimed at making like a musical instrument to make more conventional music with.
Mm-hmm. And so, what were you doing before you opened up the museum?
Immediately before, I was just doing a lot of the buying, selling, and refurbishing of synthesizers. Before that, the thing that kind of financed that and got me into that was bartending. I was working at some bars that had live music, and I play music myself.
Did you always have an interest in these synthesizers, or was it just natural progression playing instruments to using these synthesizers?
I think I've always been interested to some extent, but probably more since I was probably around 18 or so. Around that time, I started home recording. I started making my own music. And at that point, I was just interested in trying anything I could get my hands on. And synthesizers were definitely something I wanted to get my hands on. I couldn't afford an analog synthesizer for many years to come at that point. But yeah, as long as I've been interested in just like sound,
and what kind of music
as a creative
do you play?
concept. I'm in a sort of experimental rock band, kind of a Devo-ish rock band called Shame Waves, and I play synthesizer in that. And then I've got a project that I just do by myself under my name, where I use synthesizers.
Okay, so this all led to you starting to collect synthesizers, or did you start collecting synthesizers after you opened up the museum?
No, I had the collection together before I opened the museum.
Okay, so you start building up this collection, and then you decide to open up the Vintage Synthesizer Museum. Now, what makes this museum unique, and what makes it different from your typical museum that most people would just have in their mind?
Well, it's really nothing like any traditional museum, other than it's a carefully curated collection. But what I really had in mind when I named it was the Pacific Pinball Museum in Alameda, where you go and play pinball. And that place is still going. I don't know. I think I maybe wrongly assumed that people would make that connection with the pinball museum. That that it's interactive. Like, you come here to play and use synthesizers. You don't come here to just like look at a display of synthesizers.
So you've had a few articles, you've been featured in a few articles with ABC, East Bay Express, and they mentioned that visitors to the museum can actually go and play with the synthesizers. So what's that experience like for the visitor?
Well, I can't speak for people who come in, except that we've never had an unhappy customer. People seem very happy and very thankful. A lot of the pieces that we have in here are somewhat rare, and now they're pretty expensive when they do come up for sale. So it's a lot of things that are hard to get your hands on, that a lot of people have like read about or seen, but never had a chance to actually hear or experience in person. But everything's set up, plugged in, ready to play, ready to record. You just get the studio to yourself. All the appointments are private, so you get the studio to yourself.
Now, are you still continuing to grow your collection?
A little bit, not really. I'm doing this full time now, so I don't have as much money as I did when I was putting the collection together, and there's not a whole lot that we're looking to add to it at this point. It's a lot, and we only have so much space. But yeah, every once in a while we're adding things here and there, but not at any significant rate.
Mm-hmm. Now, for musicians, you explain that you can use synthesizers to use or to create a wide range of noises. I mean, what would be an example of? I mean, you gave like an example of a violin, and how would you use a synthesizer, and what kind of sound can you really make with it, and what kind of music? Because I believe you also have a history and background in EDM, correct?
I mean, I make electronic music, but yeah, I mean, that's so obviously if you want to make like electronic dance music, well, I guess you don't have to use a synthesizer. You could just use a computer now. But if you want to obviously make electronic music, you need electronic instruments to do that. When synthesizers first came out in the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of people were trying to imitate other acoustic instruments of synthesizers. I don't know that that's really as much the case these days. I think people want the sound of a synthesizer.
I mean, what would be the difference between using a synthesizer and a computer? I mean, what can it do that a computer cannot?
Well, it's just two different things, but with a given synthesizer, well, pretty much all the synthesizers we have here are mostly analog. So it's circuits with electrons going through them that's producing all of the sound, and all the components within it. And you get different variations through that. A computer is just using ones and zeros. It's very precise, and they're just two different things. There's an audible difference. I think one of the big differences, and a big reason people like to come here, is with these instruments you actually get to put your hands on them and do things in a more tactile manner in real time, instead of just doing everything with a mouse and a keyboard. Mm-hmm. I hear that a lot from people, that they've just got like computer fatigue from working in the box constantly. And here that gives you a chance to obviously get sounds that are outside of the sound palette that you would have restricted to just using a computer, but also it's just a bit of a more liberating experience if
More
you're
hands-on,
predominantly working in a computer. I'm sorry, what?
more hands-on then.
Exactly, more hands-on.
Yeah, I would imagine that allows for a lot more creativity, and like exactly what you said, computer fatigue, just sitting there using a mouse, keyboard gets old, and if you get bored with it, it
Hmm.
really limits your own creativity. Whereas if you're using actual, it's you're playing with a device, and it allows you to really express yourself, right?
Yeah, and it gives you more immediate feedback. Definitely, I mean, I find it to be much more inspirational than working in a computer, but there's a lot to be said for working in a computer as well. I mean, there's great things that come along with that as well. I definitely wouldn't eschew one for the other, but
Yeah. Now your recording
no.
studio, how did you come across that space that you're using now?
Craigslist.
Were you looking
Yeah,
just it's just on Craigslist then, huh?
yeah, it was well out of my price range. It was 3 to 4 times what I paid for previous spaces in Oakland. But when I saw it for the first time, but the space I was in at the time was just a sublet, and it was about to be up, and I was just kind of going out and just checking out everything that seemed like it could work regardless of price. But yeah, this was set up as a recording studio by the man who owns the building in the early '80s, and it just aesthetically and functionally fit what I was looking for. So, did some finagling with them on the price and got a friend of mine to go in on this space with me, and that's how we ended up here.
Hmm. Now, it's also a recording studio, correct? So people can actually go there, record music.
Well, you can record the synthesizers. We don't offer like full or anything like that. We just have all the synthesizers are routed into mixers. The mixers are routed to the recording interface, so it's all set up to record if you want to.
Okay.
Um,
Have you had
but
any well-known names or any big artists come through?
um, I don't know how big or well known they are, but yeah, we've had um, the producer from Hot Chip came through, Chief XL, guy behind the music for Black Alicious, or one half of Black Alicious came through, did a bunch of tracks. Their last album, Oscar Cash, who's the keyboard player for Metronomy, has come in a bunch, working on his solo album. Does a bunch of work here. Local heavy metal band Neurosis has come in and done recordings here. Caitlin Aurelia Smith, who's kind of a upcoming electronic performer, has done some recording here. Kelly Stoltz has come in. Toro y Moi was here a couple weeks ago.
Now, are these all like rock, or do you have a wide range of genres of music?
That's a pretty wide range. All the people I just named is like, kind of from heavy metal to hip hop to R&B to electronic music to experimental. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
And for these artists that are using it for their music, their debut albums, solo albums, how how are they using it? Are they using it for background music? Are they just, you know, maybe taking some of the beats, some of the tones that they have or the hooks, and then modifying them slightly? I mean, how are they using these synthesizers for their music?
Well, everyone's different. But like Oscar Cash, for his solo album, he came in with compositions that he had made. What he was doing predominantly is sending out MIDI information from the melodies that he had composed, and we were sending that out to a converter to control synthesizers here. So we were just kind of taking compositions that he'd already composed, sending them out to a synthesizer here, and then recording it back into his recording. So we were kind of replacing the synthesizers that he had used in the computer program with real synthesizers from here. And we get a bit of that. But a lot of people are just coming in, like when Black Alicious came in, you know, they just come in with a session player, and they've got tracks, and they just have their session, you know, describe what they want the session player to do, and then he'll just play and they'll record it. But it's all, you know, it's different across the board. So everyone works differently, and there's a lot of different things you can do here.
Okay. Now, besides just being a museum and a recording studio, you also offer workshops.
Yes.
So how can people sign up for these workshops, and what are the classes like? And are you the one teaching them, or do you have someone else that comes in to teach the workshops?
Both. I teach a workshop, and we've got other people who teach workshops. If we're redesigning, we've got a really bad website up right now that I made when we opened up with Apple iWeb, and haven't updated since then. But I just encourage people to drop us an email to get on our mailing list. When we do workshops, I announce them through the mailing list first, give that a week or two, and then announce it like on Instagram and Facebook, and try to get people in through that.
Now, what are the workshops focused
but yeah, we just
on?
do. We've got a couple that are focused on using synthesizers and using the synthesizers here in the studio, and we do workshops on Ableton Live, so recording with Ableton.
Okay. And then how much are these workshops typically, like the cost?
They're different prices for different workshops depending on how long they are. The Intro to Synthesis workshop that we do is 2 days. It's 8 hours, and it's $200.
Okay, that's not bad. That's a good price for everything that you're using and learning.
It's cheaper than, yeah, and it's cheaper than our normal hourly rate too, which is also very cheap.
So in these workshops, are you teaching people how, like, you have beginner, intermediate, and advanced courses in teaching how to use these synthesizers and how to apply it to their music?
Right now, we just kind of have beginner and intermediate. But yeah, from just like the basic fundamentals of the components of a synthesizer voice, kind of what we were discussing earlier with the oscillator, the filter, voltage-controlled amplifier, envelope generator, low frequency oscillator, so just getting right down to the basics of what the different components of a synthesizer voice and how they interact, and then into slightly more advanced things like using sequencers and cross modulation, different.
Now, are you working on an advanced version of it? Advanced workshop, basically?
I'm not. But hopefully, someone will come in and do an advanced workshop here. And
then for these workshops, I mean, what's a target demographic? Are you trying to target only musicians? And you know, on the podcast, I've had several movie directors. I mean, do you have local movie directors and filmmakers that come in and use synthesizers for audio on their movies?
I can't remember. I'm sure we have. I don't remember specifically. We've definitely had video game designers, the people who do like audio for video games.
Okay.
A lot of those have come in. And of course, that industry's here. So,
any video game that stands out to you?
I honestly wouldn't know what games any of the sounds have gone into. You know, I don't play video games, and I wouldn't know, you know, what any of these companies make or anything. So, I don't know, to be honest with you. But I would imagine, I'm sure we've had someone come in to work on film stuff. But as far as who we're targeting for anything, we're just targeting whoever wants to come in here. Whoever's interested in synthesizers, whether you're a musician or not. You certainly don't need to be a musician to take the Intro to Synthesis workshop, because we're not focusing on like musical chops. We're just focusing on why a synthesizer makes sound and how to use like the front panel of the synthesizer.
Okay. And so now let's talk a bit about, since you're an expert here, I mean, for many of the listeners that would be listening to this podcast, they're going to try to really picture where they can identify synthesizers being used. How about some noteworthy films where, maybe you can point out one or two movies where, that's where they're using synthesizers?
Mm-hmm. There was that movie Drive a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And that was all synthesizers and drum machines. Definitely a lot of stuff from the 70s and 80s, pretty much all the early John Carpenter stuff, Halloween, The Fog, the Doctor Who soundtrack, of course, is all synthesizers, or the Doctor Who theme song. Mm-hmm. Blade Runner, the old one and the new one, is all synthesizers. The Knight Rider theme.
Oh, yeah, I remember Knight Rider.
Yeah.
And so, do you grow up here in the Bay Area? Have you always been in the Bay Area?
No, I moved to the Bay Area 17 years ago from Tennessee, and I'm originally from Tennessee.
Okay. What drew you here to the Bay Area?
I had visited the Bay Area, I think, twice before I moved out here. And the year before I moved out here, I was out here for maybe a week, and just loved the Bay Area, and wanted to change. But I'd always been interested in the Bay Area, just from kind of a cultural standpoint. Growing up in Tennessee, I think I kind of, like a lot of people, romanticized the Bay Area, and for good reason. But yeah, I just kind of moved out here thinking that I'd try it out for summer. I was definitely had reservations about whether or not I'd be able to afford to stay, but it worked out. And I'm still here 17 years later. Don't know how much longer, but
and 17 years ago, prices were, I mean, it was still expensive, compared to everywhere else, but compared to today,
yeah,
really different, right?
Yeah, it's real different. Real different.
So do you start doing bartending as soon as you move to the Bay Area and playing music?
Pretty much. I got a job at a bar probably within a month of moving out here, and I worked at a cafe, and then I also worked at the bar, and then I quit the job at the cafe and got a job at Amoeba Records, and I was working at Amoeba and the bar. And then at some point I started managing the bar and quit the job at Amoeba.
Now, I assume you play music back in Tennessee, right?
I did.
So leaving Tennessee, that's a bit of the mecca for some music out there, isn't it?
Well, Nashville definitely is a mecca for songwriters and for country music. Memphis was a mecca for the blues. I don't know how much it is today. I mean, there's still like Beale Street, but that's just kind of a 2-block strip that's more of a tourist attraction. But Nashville, for sure, there's the big industry presence there.
So
but I don't do country music and never have, so that doesn't. Although I shouldn't really speak about Nashville at this point. I haven't been there for 17 years. I know that Nashville's been changing considerably the past few years. So I think there's probably a lot more stuff going on there now that I'm not aware of.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see in the next 5 to 10 years this museum? I mean, do you see it growing? Are you looking to expand, get it bigger, or are you looking to just kind of establish the museum, deeper into the roots of Oakland there?
I really don't know. I think I'm like a lot of people in the Bay Area, or at least people who are living close to the poverty line, that, everything feels kind of tenuous here. I don't know if I'll be able to afford to stay. If something happened to the studio we're in now, if the building was sold or something, I mean, that would be it. I mean, I don't see a way forward. We don't have public funding, and honestly, half the people who come here are like from out of town. So we don't even get that much business from the Bay Area. So I don't know.
A lot of your customers are from out of the Bay Area then.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they really coming from? Are they still within California, or are we talking about completely out of state coming in to your museum?
Definitely a lot of people from out of state and out of the country who are coming here visiting. Definitely a lot of people from Los Angeles. So I could definitely see maybe at some point being in Los Angeles, but I'd prefer to stay in the Bay Area. But it's the Bay Area is getting harder and harder, and we just don't have funding. We don't have money. So the Bay Area is I'm not telling anybody any new news, but it's constantly demanding more money to be here. It's
expensive out here,
yeah, and it should be. I think the Bay Area is beautiful. There's nothing like it. I certainly don't take it for granted. Everyone should want to live here. So
yeah. So your website, what's the website for the museum?
It's www.vintagesynthmuseum.com.
Okay. And you're open 7 days a week by appointment. And let's see, what are your rates to get in if someone wanted to come in and learn more about synthesizers and mess around with the equipment?
Just contact us and book an appointment. It's all by appointment. So just shoot us an email, call us. The email and phone number are both on our website. They're on Google. They're on our Instagram and Facebook pages.
Okay.
Just give us a call or an email and let us know when you want to come in, and we'll put you on the calendar.
Awesome. We'll go ahead and link up the website. And Lance, thanks for being on the podcast. And, actually, when's your next workshop? Do you have a date set?
Past weekend. I don't have another one planned. I know we're doing the Ableton again in the fall, but I don't know when. We don't have another one set after this weekend. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So next time you have a workshop set up, shoot it over to us. We'll link it up in the description for the podcast, and we'll give the museum a shout out and see if anyone wants to go, learn about synthesizers.
Would definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks again, and have a good day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.